The Attorney General for Washington, D.C. is now warning that President Trump could face criminal charges related to the Capitol insurrection. This, as shocking video just released by The New Yorker, sheds new light on the brazenness of the attack and the motivations behind it. Extremists storming the Capitol, making it clear that some of them believed President Trump and Senator Ted Cruz would approve of their actions. Joining me now to discuss is Cynthia Miller-Idriss, director of the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab at American University. And she's also the author of Hate in the Homeland, the New Global Far Right. Also joining her is her husband, Shamil Idriss. He is the CEO of Search for Common Ground, the largest peace-building organization in the world aimed at ending violent conflict globally. He was also the deputy director of the UN Alliance of Civilizations. Good to see both of you.
Good to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So, Cynthia, you first. I mean, all of this is so troubling, but, you know, in this video, which is very revealing, you hear some of the people in it talk about this is IO war, information operation war. That's what I was able to discern from, you know, listening to some of the language in there. So this insurrection, you know, it's talking about reclaiming America, and is it also about using this moment as recruitment?
Absolutely. And what you see in that segment of the video is very clearly a tension between kind of a very disciplined part of this insurrection and those who were treating it more like a tailgate. And so you can kind of see that tension play out and make it clear that there are people there who very much intended this to be a kind of propaganda performance, right? This is a global performance, just like live streaming of terrorist attacks is, and they very much intend to use it, and in fact are already using it to recruit and to try to radicalize and draw over conservative and pro-Trump voters further to the right.
You wrote in the Boston Globe that far-right extremists see the Capitol attack as a resounding success. So what is the long-term threat now?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, we have seen thwarted plots, you know, in Michigan with the governor and in Virginia. Also globally, there was an attempt to storm the German parliament by the far right 4 months ago that failed after they made it partway through the police. And so for the far right globally, not just in the US, but we're seeing this overseas as well, this is seen as a resounding success. And unfortunately, as we move forward, we're already seeing on chats and underground kind of online spaces the attempts to really scale up recruitment and further radicalization. It won't happen for the vast majority, of course, but even if this means that there's further growth in the movement, that's a very dangerous state to be in.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying it's inevitable.
I don't think it's inevitable, which is actually why I have hope here, because Shamil has been working overseas in very conflict-ridden places in the world, you know, for 35 years, and so I've learned a lot from that organization about how to move forward. It's not inevitable, but it can't be done only through a law enforcement and monitoring and surveillance lens, because those are always Band-Aid solutions.
So Shamil, how do you see it? I mean, you're listening to the writers, you hear them thanking the police for letting them in, you know, demonstrating how much they believe what they're doing is right, boasting that there are so many more people outside. I mean, they are not alone. So how do you see this, you know, movement, this mindset?
Well, you're right. I mean, on the one hand, they're thanking the police. On the other hand, others of them are swearing at the police and beating the police. You know, I think you mentioned the information operation or PR aspect of this. We have to recognize part of that is going on even in the airing of that video and the impact that it has. You know, one of the rioters says there are 500,000 people on the way. Another one says there are 4 million people on the way. There were nowhere near 500,000 people there. And the people who were storming the Capitol are not 10 feet tall. So you don't want to underestimate at all the threat. And as John Avlon said in the lead-in, you know, you need to deal with the immediate term with truth-telling and accountability and mobilize law enforcement to address the urgent violent threat. But at the same time, we know at Search for Common Ground over nearly 40 years of dealing with violent conflict that oftentimes accountability is not achieved to the satisfaction of all, and that law enforcement, especially unreformed law enforcement in this country, is unable to deal with the drivers of extremism. So you also have to deal with the much larger number of people who are not committed to violence, but who are now convinced in this country that an election was stolen and a number of other demonstrable falsehoods. And in order to address those insecurities and grievances that inform the thinking and the actions of those people, This is why Cynthia's work is so important. You have to understand how extremist groups prey on those insecurities and recruit for them, and you have to deal with those grievances and insecurities in order to deplete their ranks while providing the unified law enforcement front to address those who are committed to violence.
So Cynthia, let's talk about that, the dealing with the grievances, because, America and this new administration are faced with this kind of what seemed to be like a new momentum of a very old problem, racism and hate. So how do you see America and this administration, trying to address those grievances, identifying the grievances that seem to be at the core here?
Well, there are a couple different things that have to happen. I mean, one of these is to recognize that when we're talking about a sense of precarity or insecurity that people are feeling, that rests also on a foundation of entitlement. And so you're not seeing people who are actually economically disenfranchised in large numbers, storming the Capitol. What we see here are people who feel like something is being taken away from them and given to people who don't deserve it. And that's true of white supremacists who feel that way about white civilization and a majority white country. It's true of people who feel the Second Amendment rights are being restricted. And it's true of people who feel the election is stolen.
Can I ask
so
you,
yeah,
on that?
Sure.
If, so that might be the complaint. That's what we hear, but it's not right. I mean, it's not even correct. So then how are you going to get to the bottom of that? How do you even address that? How do you change the mind of someone who is thinking that? I mean, it's just, I guess if there was an easy answer, we would have addressed this a long time ago, but
well,
I mean.
Right, I think, absolutely. I think there's at least two things. One is you have to stitch together counter-extremism work with anti-racist practice and anti-racist work, because those two things are not, they're two sides of the same coin and they have to be addressed at the same time. But we also have to address the roots of the mass disinformation and the way that people are susceptible to online manipulation and propaganda, and the fact that millions of people believe that they're acting as patriots in believing that the election was stolen. And that is really a public education and media literacy effort that has to be done at scale for fifth graders and for 50-year-olds.
Shamil?
Well, I would, the French commentator Voltaire said that those who have the power to make you believe absurdities have the power to make you commit atrocities. And it's definitely true. And we've seen this in conflict zones around the world. To pick up on the 2 points Cynthia made, it's no mistake that my organization, a peace-building organization, actually produces hundreds of hours a year of reality television, soap operas, call-in shows, news programs, because we understand that the same platforms that can be used to drive polarization and foment hate and disinformation can also be used. We can go on the offense here to reunite and reconcile populations. We need a lot more of that kind of programming. But the second piece of it, and I hate to state the obvious, but we have to come together again as Americans in common purpose. Our motto at Search for Common Ground is understand the differences, act on the commonalities. And I'm struck, frankly, I'm thinking about an example. I could give you hundreds of examples, but I'm struck in Sierra Leone as an example after a civil war that tore that country apart. And in the lead up to an election that promised to be perhaps just as fractious as the one we've had here, if not worse, the citizens of that country joined together in the largest coalition of civil society organizations in the country's history as a united front, and said to all of the political parties that you all have your political platforms, but we've developed the Citizens Manifesto with 7 demands that no matter who wins, we want to see you do these things in the first 100 days. And they went to basic things like financial transparency, women in the cabinet, things that a vast majority across the political and other dividing lines Sierra Leoneans could agree to. And we as Americans can do absolutely the same thing. But we need to start now. We need to start forging that common ground now. The need is urgent and the choice is in front of us. Other countries have done it, and so can we.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. I like the idea of hope in your voice there and in your words. Shamil Idriss, Cynthia Miller-Idriss, thanks to both of you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Fred.